Okay, today's April 19th, 2011. I'm Mike Schmear, and this interview is being conducted by the Oak Lodge History Detectives and the Clackamas Community College Oral History Project. Today we're interviewing the Briggs sisters, Enid Briggs and Adele Wilder. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
Why aren't you home working in the yard today?
We wished we were.
When I met with you folks before, we talked a lot, and I understand that both your mother and your father's families have been here for some time in this general area.
That's right.
Let's start with your mother's side of the family. Who were they? What their names were? Where they were from? When did they arrive?
Okay, my mother and father,
Oh, the mother.
my grandmother and grandfather both came from Baden, Germany, and they came over to Milwaukie in 1879. Before they came here, they were in Chicago. They went from Chicago to San Francisco on a train and took a sailing ship up to Portland. And at Portland, they decided to find a place to raise their family, and they came to Milwaukie. That was in 1879. And they came to Milwaukie, and by the Kellogg Lake is where they decided to settle. Can I read just a couple paragraphs of
Sure.
It's very interesting, I think. This was written by one of the grandsons. Grandpa Birkemeier, listed in census reports as Frederick, always signed his name as Fred Birkemeier. He apparently did not have a middle name. His father was Fred, sometimes listed as Hanfred Birkemeier, and his mother was Elizabeth, also listed as Alcibine, maiden name not known. Dad came, and this was written by one of his sons. Dad came to the United States with his parents, a brother, and a sister. When he was under 4 years of age, he told us his parents left Germany because they and several other of their friends who were conscientious Christian folks were beginning to feel they did not have the freedom there in Germany to believe as they liked. At the age of 23, after he came here, he married Emma Kuchenbeiser, and about 3 years later, Mother and Dad came by train to San Francisco. That was from Chicago. And from there by boat to Portland, where they lived about a year, and then came to Milwaukie. In later years, Dad took up a homestead on Kellogg Creek in Milwaukie. In later years, the creek was dammed up at Milwaukie, making the lake behind their old home. The creek ran into the Willamette River about a quarter of a mile from the property. The only means of transportation then from Milwaukie to Portland was by steamer and boat on the Willamette River, and the boat made a trip only once a week. The whole country was tall timber, mostly firs, and no roads by any distance. Dad was a carpenter by trade. So while he was clearing this land and getting it ready for cultivation, he would leave early Monday morning by boat to go to Portland to work as a carpenter, and then come back home Saturday night for the weekend, or really only one day. Then between jobs on the place, someone had to stay in the homestead, of course, so Mother and children stayed alone during the week. Believe it or not, Dad made $1 a day at carpenter. carpentering, and later $3 a day. After he got the land cleared and cultivated, he planted an orchard of Italian prunes. When they began to bear, he built a large building for a prune dryer. The entire crop was dyed for market. Of course, there were Indians in the West, but I don't believe the folks saying, remember hearing the folks saying much about it, but I do know they never made any trouble. Many times they would be camped out, not far from their place or maybe on their property, particularly along the stream, and they would travel from place to place on their horses. I have some arrowheads and spears that my grandfather gave me from that. In the
We don't have the whole
30s,
book.
I got one paragraph more here. In the 30s, when Dad had their house moved, when the highway went through the property, they were digging for the basement and found a spearhead. That's the one that I have. About 6.5 inches long and 2.5 inches wide, deep in the dirt. And so I'll stop right there as to what they did. It's kind of interesting.
So that narrative talks about them coming to Milwaukie about 1879, was it?
Right.
Right.
And built a home there on Kellogg Creek, which became later Kellogg Lake. So what became of that house?
That house is still there. It's kind of interesting. At first it was built where the streetcar line went through and the trolley line. And later when they built or had the trolley line, my grandfather sold the property to the traction company, and they had to move the house, so they moved it east a little ways. And in 1939 about, they decided to build the super highway, which is 99
McLaughlin.
McLaughlin Boulevard.
Boulevard. Boulevard. And the
Super
house had to
highway.
be moved again. And so now the house is just over the, kind of over the rim of the highway there. It's still there. It's been painted up. It's always kept pretty beautiful.
So that's that beautiful home on the, I guess it would be the east side of McLaughlin Boulevard, just as you're coming into Milwaukie from the south, isn't it?
Right.
That's right.
Right overlooking the lake.
At Island Station.
At Island Station. Now you might know what Island Station is, but not everybody else does.
Okay, as the trolley line was built, there were many stations that went to Oregon City. There was, and you have to help with this, there was, of course, Milwaukie, then Island.
Yeah, the streetcar came from Portland and it stopped a lot of places in Milwaukie. Then it was Island Station, Lakewood Station, Park Avenue, Evergreen Station, and on up, and I don't remember all of them, which is now becoming the trolley trail. And so that's where the stations were, where people get on and off.
We'll talk about the trolley
Yeah,
line
later.
a little bit more here in a while. But your grandfather then actually sold his property for part of that
Right.
streetcar
yes.
line, didn't he? Okay.
And then for the highway,
And then later he had to
super-
move it again because
Yes.
of the highway.
right.
So he had to move that house twice. How did he ever move it?
We don't know.
How do you move a house that big?
His
Downhill.
son,
Downhill.
I'm not sure how old they were when they started having to move the house, but my mother's brothers, 2 of them were also carpenters. 3 of them were carpenters.
Well, I'm sure they were old enough to help, but I don't know. We don't know. We wished we
I don't know
knew.
exactly how they did it, but it must have been interesting.
Was it a big family, the Birkemeiers?
My mom had 9 brothers
There was
and
10.
sisters. There were
9.
10 of them in the family.
10 altogether.
Right.
Wow. The narrative that you just read to us, and thank you for that, spoke of how your grandfather had to get into Portland to do his work and get home again. And that he was a carpenter.
Right.
What did Grandma do?
I think she took care of the 10 kids.
She took care of all of those.
But they did have prune orchard and they did have the big prune dryer, so I'm sure that she had to tend that. However, I'm thinking she probably made sure her children each had a share in all this work.
Mm-hmm.
She probably cooked the meals and did the
Well, with
washing.
10 kids, I imagine that kept her pretty
I
busy
think
right
it did.
there.
I think so. And
Uh-huh.
by doing laundry, they didn't have the facilities they have now. So it would take her longer and
Uh-huh.
to cook and everything. So I'm sure that's what she did. Nothing else.
After they did get roads and the streetcar, of course, my grandfather also did a lot of construction work in Milwaukee, and I have just a few of the things that he did here. Some of the construction projects that Fred Sr. was involved in, including the Milwaukee First State Bank, the Evangelical Church, the Cogswell's Log House on the lake, and I'll mention a little bit about that. What's the name of those?
It's apartments there now as you go down McLaughlin, just before, on the right-hand
Same
side,
as-
before you come in. I don't know the names of them. I don't
Yeah, a
know.
little further south than the Birkemeier's house.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Those
Uh-huh.
apartments were all the Cogswell farm.
I see,
rent.
Cogswell Farm.
Right now, the office building for those apartments is the log house that the Cogswells lived in.
Hmm.
And they were very prominent people in Portland also.
Hmm.
It was also,
He
it
was
was
a,
Galinsky that
yeah.
lived there. Okay, the Byers House near Carver. And if you go out to Carver, you see the big, on the left side of the highway going from Milwaukee to Carver, you see a big house that they sold.
Well, it used to be a place where they had lace and dolls and all kinds of things. It was a huge, big place and a big barn and a big, beautiful home. The home is still there. They've incorporated a lot of houses around, but the house is there, and Grandpa built that one. So he had
Oh.
to take horse and buggy to go out there.
And the Bogus House on Evergreen Avenue, and that was built almost the same looking style as the one that they lived in. And in the McLaughlin house where my aunt and uncle lived, which is now the part of the farm. That was a farm out there, which is now where the senior center is.
Milwaukie Center
Milwaukee Center. So,
Down in the park.
Park,
Yeah.
North Clackamas Park.
We need to take a quick break for a technical problem we're having. So, one moment, please.
Okay.
Michael, when we can start again. Anytime. So, we've talked about your grandmother's family, the Birkemeiers, and they came early. Grandpa Birkemeier built many houses in the area. He was a carpenter by trade. And and Grandma Birkemeier was tending to 10 children.
10 children.
So let's talk a little bit about the Briggs family.
Okay.
What can you tell me about your Briggs family, when they came, where they were from?
Okay, my grandmother Briggs came from, she came from Carina, Maine, back there, and they came out to Portland around 1900, and they came on train, but at that time there was no trains coming across the river. So where the trains all went at that time was to Goble, Oregon,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a barge that took the train across the river. Then they came on the other side of the river right into Portland. And my grandmother's name was Tibbetts.
Her maiden name was
Her
Tibbetts.
maiden name was
Uh-huh.
Tibbetts, right. And I guess a lot of the other Tibbetts came here. That's why the name Tibbet Street in Portland.
Oh.
I found that out. And
What was her first name?
her first name was Mariah.
Mariah.
Right. Mariah Tibbetts. And she married Johnson Briggs. And they settled on
So
here in Milwaukie up on the farm up above Briggs Avenue.
So that's up on the higher ground?
Higher ground,
Off
yes.
at the, kind of the east end of Park Avenue area?
yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
They had orchards, and he did a lot of work with orchard trees and
Uh-huh.
different things like that.
Uh-huh. Do you have any idea how much property he had when he came?
It must have been around 30 acres. Or
30
so.
acres.
I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
So, can you tell me roughly what the today's boundaries of that might have been? Did it go to Oatfield Road on the west side? No?
Briggs to Nixon Avenue on the east.
Okay.
I don't know how to tell you up the other way because it didn't go clear to Snowberry, but it was up that direction and all the way down to Nixon the other way.
All the way down to Nixon. 30 to 40 acres. What was his occupation? Johnson's?
I think it was mostly working in
Farming.
farming, just farming around the area, selling milk, and they had a lot of trees, orchards and things. Right at the end of Evergreen Avenue, as you come to Briggs, was where one of the big main orchards was.
Mm,
And they raised a lot of chickens and things like that.
Just farmed.
farming.
Mhm.
Hmm. Where did both the Birkemeiers and the Briggs children go to school?
Milwaukie.
Milwaukie.
There was no other schools around.
That was it.
That was it.
Now that was grade school and
High
later
school.
high school?
Mhm.
I see.
Mhm.
Huh.
My mother graduated, no, that was the other side of the family. I guess this was my dad's.
No, well, either one. He
I
has
was
probably
thinking
the one.
when she was, I didn't mention that though when I was talking. My mother graduated the first graduating class of Milwaukie High School because of the fact that before that, all the high school students only had 2 years of high school and had to go to Portland to finish out their 4 years. Then they decided to have a 4-year high school, so there was 2 girls and 2 boys that graduated in the first class, and from then on, Milwaukie grew.
And that was what year again?
1914.
14. And your mother's name was Rachel?
Rachel.
Rachel Birkemeier Briggs.
Right.
So how did your parents meet?
We don't know.
My mother worked in offices on Portland Road, the streetcar down there when she got out of high school. And my father worked at Miller
No, not then. Fuller's or
Fuller's
someplace.
Paint and Strobridge Hardware. And somewhere along the line, they met because of a friend of my father's, I believe his name was Jack Sherrard. He was a Mazama and did a lot of hiking and things. My dad hiked with him, and somewhere along the line, their friends, Charlotte Marriott, who lived in a house on Oatfield Road where,
That's okay.
what?
I said, that's okay.
Okay. Anyway, young people got together for different parties and things like that, and that's where they met.
So they probably met at a party.
Yeah,
That's
I guess.
probably-
And
I
then
don't know, it was a party as we know a party. They went hiking and that
Yeah, they
picnicking
did a lot of
and
hiking with the Mazamas. And,
those kind of things.
chaperone
There.
parties.
Yeah.
So they were married where?
They were married in Newport, Oregon.
Your parents?
Yeah,
My
they went down there.
parents.
Oh,
And I mean, that by the pastor that, well, they were married at home on the lake down here in the home, and then they went down there for their honeymoon.
Yeah,
That's
Oh.
the way it
he,
was.
oh, I see.
yeah, they got
Okay.
married here.
And I don't know. Your father's name was
Morris.
Morris.
Or
Okay.
Maurice is the way it's spelled. But
Okay.
it was Morris.
So Morris and Rachel were married at the Rachel's family home
Right.
Yes.
on the lake there.
Yes.
Okay. So do you know what year that was?
What year did they get married? 1924?
They got married in 1924, right?
Okay. So where did they live? Where did they settle down?
Okay, they settled down on,
Briggs Avenue,
settled
which
down
was
on-
not Briggs Avenue at the
that
time.
was-
It wasn't Briggs Avenue then?
No, no, they didn't know anything about them then. It was Oak Street.
Okay.
And up on where Briggs is now, up about 6 houses from Evergreen on part of the Briggs farm.
I see. Okay.
And they built a little house
They built
there.
a house.
Mhm.
And is that where they stayed most of their life, in that house?
No,
They were there for 1 year, that's where I was born. A funny story about that, my doctor was Dr. Rimley, who was one of the prominent doctors in Milwaukie. And we were all born, all of our family kids were born at home, and he was our doctor. On my birth certificate, he has that I was born at Evergreen Station, which sounded like my mother just got off the streetcar and had me. But anyway, I was born at home.
Right out there in the open.
right there. It had a little cover.
Oh, well, that makes it better. You were born under a covered
Streetcar
station.
station.
Covered station.
And then Dad built a house next to that,
The streetcar station?
the next to the streetcar station.
No, we're just kidding.
No, next to the little house where they lived.
Okay.
And then
That was their second house.
that was their second house, and that's where the rest of the family, the kids were born and raised until
It was
what year?
about 1938, when they decided that he'd like to move down where the woods was. So they built another house.
So,
He built a third house down a little further north, maybe?
yes, where we are now on the corner of Briggs and Nixon.
Okay. Is that the house you're living in?
That's right.
So tell everybody that you're living in the house that,
Our dad built, and we built it, and because of the war, they couldn't finish the house, so we lived in it. As the house we're in now was supposed to be a double garage part with the house next to it. And then they couldn't finish it. By the time they were able to do that, we were married and gone, so they didn't think they needed a big house, so they just remodeled that
I see.
and stayed there. So
Okay.
they've been there ever since, and then we took over, and they're gone.
Wow. In those first two houses, let's say the first one, did they have electricity at that time?
Yes,
There was electricity already in the area? And what did they do for water?
we had
We had running water,
running water.
so I don't know,
Were you on a well?
No,
No well. I'll be darned.
we had
so we
a,
had water and electricity.
Huh.
on their farm they had a well earlier on.
Earlier on.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh. And who were the neighbors around there?
Well, there was Jack Sherrard, a very prominent neighbor. He never did get married. He was a single gentleman who, again, I said he was in the Mazamas, did a lot of hiking, picture taking. I have a lot of his beautiful pictures that he took. My father climbed Mount Hood with him 2 or 3 times, and They did a lot of things like that.
And the Salisburys lived behind us,
Yeah,
which I think that you're going to interview them at some point in time.
Mm-hmm. Dick Salisbury's
Dick
mother.
Salisbury.
Jerry.
There was not many people around. We didn't have a lot of neighbors.
No? No neighbors?
No. It was all farmy.
most of our people that we knew lived on Oatfield Road. Those were friends of my mother's, like the,
Hearts and Hearts and
Naomi Hart
I can't
and
remember.
Dora Broche and on up the road. All those were people that I went with her a lot of times to have coffee with and just meet and do things
It was
with.
just farmland. There wasn't a lot of people around. From Leffelman on south, Briggs didn't even go through. It was just a little walk trail.
What was Oakfield Road like then?
Bumpy.
Well, there
Was it paved?
It wasn't paved like it is now, but it was fixed somehow, so it was pretty smooth to ride on.
Another house on Oakfield Road was almost the Hart, across from the Hart's place was the Miller's place. And my mother used to send me up there they raised mushrooms.
Oh.
And they had a big barn-like structure out there. And when she wanted mushrooms, I'd take a trip up and get them.
Huh.
And that house is there.
Huh.
Yeah. So
So
there was
neighbors
no-
were people on Oakfield more than people next door.
I see.
Like we think of neighbors.
I see. Huh. Interesting. What about businesses in the area? What do you remember back when you were growing up?
In the area?
Yeah. Were there any?
I don't recall any, except later on, there was that little gas station on Oakfield Road.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I don't recall any.
So where did
Businesses.
you get your groceries?
Oak Grove.
Yeah, Oak Grove.
We went to Oak Grove,
How did you get to Oak Grove to get your groceries?
little Model A Ford.
Model A Ford.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. I see. What about the post office?
Our post office
That was in Milwaukie,
Milwaukee.
and it was across the street from the bank, and it was just a little hole in the wall, little
Mhm.
itty bitty place,
I see.
right downtown Milwaukee.
And your parents grew their own vegetables on the property?
Yep.
They had an orchard, you said.
Yep.
So what types of things were they growing?
Well, Dad grew every vegetable there was, and
He had
Mom,
a
did,
greenhouse too.
and Mom did a lot of canning. So
Mm-hmm.
he spaded that ground, didn't have a tractor, spaded it all by hand, and then planted all the vegetables. And of course, we had all the fruit.
So you had apple trees. What other kind of trees did you have? Fruit
Pear.
trees? Pear?
Plum,
What kind of pears?
just the regular Bartlett
Bartlett's.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And plums.
and plums.
Cherries.
Oh, and cherries, yeah.
Kind of cherries.
Royland.
Royal Anne.
I don't
And
know, I think we had a
pie
bing.
cherries too.
Oh, yeah, we had a pie cherry tree.
Okay.
Royal Anns and Bings and pie cherries.
So you two were growing up. How many siblings did you have?
There was 4 of us.
There were 4.
And then we had one brother that died at the age of 2.
I see.
The 3 of us then went on, and my brother passed away 10 years ago now. And so there's the 2 of us left.
Just the 2 of you out of
Yeah.
the 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
the 2
You
old
went
ladies.
to, where did you go to grade school?
Milwaukie Grade School.
Milwaukie Grade S-
Grammar School.
It was grammar school then. And then,
Junior high.
oh, junior high. So you had a junior
By the time
high.
we went to what is now the Waldorf School.
Okay.
And then-
Waldorf.
Yeah. And
Where was Waldorf? Same location?
No, Waldorf only started existing in the last few years. And
Okay.
that was downtown. That was Portland. They moved out here from Portland.
Oh, okay. And how did you get to school?
Walked.
Walked?
Not for grade school.
We had a bus, but we had to walk half the way there to get the bus.
And church?
We went to Minthorn community, and that was what my grandfather built, along with a lot of other people from my aunts and uncles and so on. Actually, they built in 1888. My grandfather built the Evangelical Church in Milwaukie, and they went there until I was 2 years old, about 2 or 3, and the church decided to start a little Sunday school up on Minthorn Hill in Milwaukie. And it was called Minthorn Hill because Dr. Minthorn had lived there, and he was the uncle of President Hoover.
Uh-huh.
So President Hoover spent some time in Milwaukie because his uncle lived there. And when they built the church, then President Hoover gave our church a stained glass window, which we're very proud of. It's still in our church today, but we outgrew that church, so it's over on Linwood Avenue in Milwaukie, but the windows
But tell
are
about the
inside.
other one, 40th and Llewellyn,
Anyway, yeah, it's on 40th. The church is on 40th and Llewellyn,
Which is
the
still
Minthorn
there.
community, and that's the
I
one
see.
we went to Sunday school. Every kid in my grade school, I think, came to Sunday school with it. We have a picture at the museum, and it's just probably 50 kids in the grade school there. Sunday school.
nothing else to do.
So church was a big part of your family's
Right.
life?
That was
Well,
an-
it was a community thing because there was
Yeah.
nothing, there wasn't the activities going
It-
on other than that.
Mhm.
It was interesting during the war because we had a big youth group, and a lot of my high school friends were there. It seemed like every time we had a party, they had a blackout during the war, which was very strange. It seemed like they did that on purpose. But, lights would all have to go out and sit there for 10 minutes, and then the lights would come on again.
So the church was a big part of your activities.
That's
So you say there wasn't a whole lot else to do, so if I ask you what you did for fun
Oh, we had
in those early years,
Well-
it was all church-oriented activities?
Pretty much, because there wasn't a lot, but then we could go roller skating down at Oaks Park and those kinds of things.
How did you get there?
By an old car.
Okay.
Well, the fun thing kind of was, as you went to a group, it wasn't necessarily church kids, but our age group, we'd get on the trolley and we'd go up to where Rokes is.
Uh-huh.
We'd have a Rokes, and then
What was that called then?
a Rokes.
Roke still? Okay.
And then just north of that, a little ways where maybe Buster's is now, there was a big dairy building in there. They sold milk and ice cream. And we would have the Rokes, and we'd walk down there and have ice cream, and then we'd go back to the streetcar and go home. So the fun on the streetcar was tantalizing the driver.
So,
Or the lake. We spent a lot of time on the lake.
just swimming,
Boating
boating and swimming?
and swimming.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
So that was, the lake itself was popular amongst lots of the
Oh,
neighborhood
yes, yes.
kids and families?
Yeah.
Oh,
So, any horseback riding?
Yeah.
she did. She had a horse.
Every Saturday, like they said, a lot of the kids from Milwaukie were at our youth group, and we went out to Viola, which is out by
Redlands.
Redland.
Mhm.
Yeah. And every Saturday, we'd go horseback riding out there for a long time. The fellow that owned the horses out there had a ranch kind of, and his name was Billy Graham. And he took us up into the mountains up there. We did a lot of horseback riding in those days. Our friends.
As a group.
You didn't do any around your home much?
No.
Well, later I had a
She
horse
bought a
for a while,
horse.
but then I went to college and my mother didn't like to care for
What was that horse's name?
Red.
And what was your mother's problem with Red?
Got loose.
She'd have to go up the street
Appreciate
and get
that when I was gone.
it. She'd tie it to the car and bring it home by the car.
She got a little tired of that game, huh?
Yeah,
The Red kind of liked that game, though.
I think so. And then Red suddenly had to leave.
So around your neighborhood where you grew up, on the Briggs property, whatnot, were there any springs, water springs?
Oh, yes.
That's what's happening right now.
I think it's all in our basement right now. On Evergreen, there was two big ponds, big cement ponds that were, we called them the frog ponds, but it was spring water, and that came down, and Dad even had on our place a well for a while from a spring.
I see.
But I don't know, it seems as the houses come in, the springs disappear or change course, I don't know.
We have a creek on our place, which all my days of growing up through college and all, it ran beautifully. They started building houses up above Evergreen there, and it ruined the springs, which ruined our creek. It runs, but very slowly compared to what it used to, yes.
I see.
Springs all over the area because, like, right now, there's springs changing in our yard,
Yeah.
and it's,
I
Making
see.
the lay of the land different.
I
It used
see.
to be flat and now it's bumpy.
I see. So you mentioned that your grandfather had found some Indian artifacts. Have you found Indian artifacts around there yourself?
yes,
We used to.
about every year when we
Plow the garden.
our yard, we dig up arrowheads.
Do you suppose there's a connection between any of those artifacts and the springs that used to be around there?
I don't know.
I think that my father said that our creek that ran down there is where he got our grinding bowl that we have for grinding the Indians used. I have it at home now.
So they must have been around
So
up in
they
the
must have
area.
got from that creek area where those, she mentioned the two big places where those main springs were. They must have got water there or something.
So to this day, you're still occasionally finding arrowheads
I
or
don't know.
artifacts?
Within a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
I
maybe a
found
couple
those,
of years,
yeah.
but it
Amazing.
not, yeah,
Amazing.
but not like we did at first.
So you talked a little bit about the streetcar. Where all did you go that you used the streetcar for
To work.
transportation? To work.
Yeah.
You say that kind of
Yeah.
begrudgingly. Where did you work?
In Portland
Uh-huh.
at Commercial Credit,
Okay. And about when was that?
45 and 46 and, no, I graduated in 46, 47 and 48, 49,
So you were still using the streetcar
yeah.
then? Okay. What about you, Enid?
She didn't take the streetcar ever, I don't think, to work or anything.
I didn't go to work.
No,
in
she
a
bought a car.
streetcar. It's kind of interesting, during the war was when I graduated. And day I graduated, a friend of mine's dad owned a PNC tool company in Milwaukie. And he said, we're doing work for making tools for the Navy, so we need more people. So the day a couple days after I graduated, I started working at PNC Tool Company in a shipping place, and I worked there for 3 years. And so I
So why
had,
did you quit
the
there?
day I got out of high school, I bought a half-acre and a car.
Wow. What kind of
Yeah.
car?
38 V8 convertible.
Yellow.
It was yellow with a black top, so I got to take kids around with me. But during the war, you couldn't do anything without ration stamps.
So we didn't
So
go very
I
far.
had to have gas stamps, and I got extra ones because I picked up people to go to work on.
I'll be darned.
But
That's funny.
I rode the streetcar a lot with the kids when we
Yeah,
were
but
in
not
high
to work.
school, like up the road
Fun
and around. But I
things.
never went to work or anything on it.
The street
I drove my car to work.
the streetcar line is becoming a trolley trail
Right.
now. What was it like actually riding the streetcar? You're bobbing back and forth. Is that what it was? Just a lot of motion back and forth and bumpy?
Not super bad, but yes, you certainly felt you were on a streetcar.
Was it enclosed?
Yes.
And how many conductors or
They had one, and then it would go this way, he would be there, and when he got to the end of the line, he would go back to the other side of the car and go the other way.
okay,
So it didn't turn around, it just went back and forth.
okay. I've heard stories that some of those conductors were very protective of the younger people or looked after the younger kids, made sure they got off in the right spots. Is that true?
I think so.
Uh-huh.
Because we knew one of the conductors, so he knew where we belonged.
So they pretty much knew where you were going to be getting off? They knew you well enough? Tell me about how the Depression affected your family?
I don't think the Depression affected our family too much because my father always had a job. Of course, I guess they had less money then, but
I think it probably, we didn't realize it, but Mom probably worked harder and Dad worked hard. They had a job and we had food, so we were okay. But I think they probably had to stretch things a lot more than we ever realized because we were young. Didn't know what was going
and
on.
also
But we had fun, and I've never been sorry for that.
Uh-huh.
I think we had the best kind of food during the Depression because, like she said, they did stretch things, made things go farther and invented new kinds of dishes or.
Oh, well, you didn't eat out of a can, you learned how to cook from scratch.
Mhm. So your dad was employed all through the Depression?
Yes.
So you don't have any recollections of super hard times?
No.
Okay. Do you have any other recollections of that era?
Pushing the car when it ran out of gas.
That was mostly during the war.
Oh, yeah, that was during the war. That wasn't the Depression. Probably didn't have a car. Yeah, we did.
So when your dad passed away pretty young, did he not? Yeah.
Well, he was 65.
Oh, he was 65. And how did that happen?
He was building the house. It wasn't complete, the changing over, and he was working at Miller Paint, and he was on his way home from work, and he got off at Park Avenue in this highway, and a car hit him as he was crossing the highway. So
Oh.
he didn't get to ever appreciate his retirement.
And so about what year was that?
Let's see, 57.
Okay,
Say that
so
louder.
50, well, I'm thinking 57, Paula's 55.
so McLaughlin Boulevard, Highway 99, had been in place for a number of years by that time, and traffic was bad enough that he just got
They
hit.
tried to many years get a traffic light there like there was farther up, and they said, well, nobody could stop coming down the hill, so they wouldn't put a light there. I mean, it was the silliest thing you ever heard, till somebody
That was
gets
the answer.
killed and they do
Yeah,
that.
that's too bad. McLaughlin Boulevard started out, do you remember when it was built? Do you?
Oh, yeah, I remember walking on it from Grandpa's house home before there was ever cars on it. So I'm thinking 70 years ago.
Yeah. And prior to that, people used,
You know, I don't remember what was even there prior to that. Oh, well, it was Lake Road and River Road were the two main, and Oldfield.
Oldfield
Yeah,
Road.
Oldfield.
Oldfield Road and River Road.
and the trolley line.
And the trolley.
That were the three main modes of getting around. Let's talk about your high school years, both of you. What kind of curriculum did they have when you were in high school? How big were the classes?
Biology.
Well, the classes were probably, what am I want to say, 20? I don't know. There seemed like a lot of kids in them. And they didn't have all the extra. You had your reading, writing, and math, and biology, and main subjects, and you went from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock and had a break for lunch, and that was it. You didn't have all these extra curriculum things that they have now.
Enid, what
And I
about
didn't
you?
like biology.
You didn't like biology, but you did.
Yeah.
What were your favorite classes?
Biology, chemistry, all the science classes.
Sciences.
Yeah, I enjoyed
Uh-huh.
that.
What did you do for activity? What did you do for, did you take sports, either of you?
Uh,
Didn't
I
have it
would
for
have
girls.
taken sports, except they decided that it wasn't good for ladies to do extracurricular sports, so we had to do intramural stuff and run around in class with a book on our head to see that we walked right. You know,
That's what our
that
teacher
kind of
did.
stuff.
In our
But I
PE
love-
class, we put a book on our head, and we walked around the gym.
Yeah.
Stand up straight.
The only extracurricular they had was tennis for the girls.
Yeah,
But
boring.
I always wanted to play basketball and stuff, so when I went, it's funny how I got to college, and she can tell you that.
You want me to?
Yeah.
My favorite subject, though, at high school was shorthand and typing and all that, and that's what I went into after I graduated.
Yeah, you said you went to work for a firm in Portland.
Right.
Uh-huh. And that's what you were doing there for
Yes.
them? What was the name of it again?
Commercial credit.
Commercial Credit in
Yes.
Portland.
Yes.
You already said that you got to high school by walking a ways and catching a
No,
bus?
high school, we walked all the way.
You walked all the way
Grammar
during high
school,
school?
we got picked up part of the way. Yeah.
Okay, all the way. And Enid, you graduated from high school in what year?
1943.
1943.
Yay.
So World War II had begun. What did you do out of high school?
Well, that's when I started about 2 days after I got out, I started working at PNC Tool Company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
They made Navy tools and so on. I worked in the shipping department, but it was interesting. A lot of my friends worked in the office, and in those days you didn't have computers and all those things. So they had, when the Navy sent in an order, they would put it on a little string and send it down a hole, and we'd pick it up and do the shipping of it from down there. But it was really fun because when I got a little clip there and I put a spider or something on it and said to back up for the
Were you a troublemaker?
I guess
So that was up on up by what
32nd,
today is
yeah.
Providence,
Providence,
Milwaukee
yeah.
on 32nd.
Right.
Where the wellness party is now.
Okay. Uh-huh. And how long did you stay there?
I was there 3 years, then I went to college.
And where did you go to college?
Well, I went.
George Fox and Linfield.
How did I get the George
He
Fox?
didn't ask you that.
I know, but I was gonna say you could.
Now Adele's asking the questions. This is
Yeah.
great. So going back to high school. Did you have a car, either of you, while you were in high school?
No.
No,
Not until you
Family only
graduated.
had one car, period.
Period.
Yeah.
And they actually let you drive it?
No.
Oh no.
I drove it just a little.
Okay, so Adele, when did you graduate from high school?
46.
So-
1946.
The war had ended right then. Okay, so we got you both out of high school,
Yeah,
and
finally.
you went to work for a few years, and then you went to college at
George Fox.
George Fox.
I graduated from there, but it was interesting because I had always wanted to get into sports of some kind. So I played basketball 4 years at college, and then I went to work. I was majored in science, so I was going to be a lab technician, and so I graduated from George Fox, and my cousin had a job at Huntington Rubber Company in Portland on Macadam, and he said, we need somebody down here. So the next day I graduated I started working there and took more chemistry up on the hill at
OHSU.
OHSU to go into lab technician work. Well, I worked there for a year, and I got a call from the college saying, would you come back and work in the PE department? So I thought that was a pretty good idea. So I went back there, and they offered me a job, and I got to teach some PE. I decided that was kind of fun, so I graduated again also from Linfield College with a major in PE. While I was working there, so I was working at George Fox for 2 years, so it was pretty neat because I got paid for working there. I got my room and board, and I got
A new degree.
to go to Linfield.
How did you?
I graduated from there also.
You graduated from Linfield also. How did you jockey this working at George Fox and going to Linfield, knowing that they're separated by several miles?
Well,
Took
I
a
worked
bus.
at George Fox in the morning and went to Linfield in the afternoon.
But you took a
and
bus.
I took a bus over
Yeah.
there.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Okay, so you worked there at George Fox and had your teacher's certificate, was it, from Linfield? Or you
I
got a
got-
degree from Linfield so you could teach?
Yeah, I majored in biology and at George Fox and science of all kinds. And at Linfield, I majored in history and PE.
Got your
And
degree
it was
there.
fun coaching and working at George Fox. I decided, well, maybe high school would be fun to do. So then I went into high school teaching. And I taught for 39 years high school.
Poor kids.
Which high schools?
I taught at Napa High School down by Astoria for 21. And then they started North Clackamas Christian across from the college at Oregon City. So I was there 14 years. So.
When you were in college taking these science classes, were there many women in those classes?
Oh yeah, a lot of them, quite a few.
Mm-hmm. Adele,
Didn't do it.
you, when you graduated in 1946, what did you do then? You worked for a while?
Well, I just worked for the summer, and then I went to college. I went to George Fox.
You went to George Fox. How did you end up going to George Fox?
Well, when they had college fairs in those days, they just came around to the high school. They didn't have a big thing down at a Coliseum because there wasn't any. And so this very interesting man from George Fox was there talking about the college, and nobody was going to hear him. And I felt sorry for him. So I gathered all my friends, and we went to hear this gentleman talk. And I thought, ooh, that sounds pretty good. So I signed me, her, 2 or 3 other people, and we all went to George Fox that fall.
Sounds like a pretty casual way of doing it, but whatever works.
Well, and at that time, college wasn't as expensive. And of course, the boys were still in the service. There was hardly any guys at college because it was mostly women and very few people compared to what it is, of course, now. So they were anxious to get anybody, and it wasn't all that expensive then to go because of that. So,
Okay. So you went to George Fox, and then what?
but I didn't graduate.
Okay.
I decided I wanted to do a little traveling.
A little traveling?
And I was going to travel and
How did that come
work.
about?
Well, I had a girlfriend that worked for a car dealership, and at that point in time, you bought a car, you went back to Detroit and picked it up and drove it home. And so she gathered up 3 or 4 friends, and we flew back to Detroit, which was by a prop jet, which is nothing like now, and bought the car and drove it back home.
I see.
And so that was more fun than going to college at the time.
So you opted out of going back to college.
And I went to work then. That's when I went to, well, I was working at Commercial Credit by that time.
I see.
Yeah.
And
Then I got married and I didn't work for many
Before
years.
you got married, you went down to,
Oh, I did some other traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got married and then I didn't work all the time for a long time, and then I went back to work for Northwest Wholesale Stationers as an executive secretary
okay.
for 20 years.
Okay.
And I
So-
thought it was time to quit.
So you opted for a different style of life than your sister, who went into teaching and taught for years and years, and you became a mother and a wife and
And
worked
lost 2 men.
and lost 2 men.
Bossed.
Bossed 2 men.
That's what executive secretaries do.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, you must have enjoyed that. What was it like? You've both now have mentioned a few things about World War II. You mentioned blackouts during some of those activities with your chums through church and whatnot. What was your experience through the war?
I don't think that you really realized how serious a war was. We didn't see anything except we had rationing, so we couldn't do this or that. And if you were at home at night, you had to leave the lights out or cover the windows. But I don't know that it affected.
What
me
things
that
were
there was a
rationed?
war.
tires on cars, shoes,
Gas.
gasoline, butter. When you made butter, you bought this little bag of white stuff, and you had a pill you put in it, and you wiggled it and you
Made it
your
yellow.
butter yellow. That's why you got yellow butter. It was kind of interesting, but during, I don't know what else. A lot of things were rationed. I know
Sugar.
that it's real interesting. She'll say I'm mentioning something about Indians, which I still do a lot of talking to garden clubs and things, and the Indians made a substance they call pemmican out of dried berries and meat and so on. But during the war, the army took that over and had a little can of ration that the soldiers had to take out. They called that pemmican, and they got that name from the Indians, but it wasn't like the Indians did. It was like raisins and peanuts and things like that. They still call it pemmican. So that was a ration thing that went out. But during the war, I belonged to the Civil Air Patrol, and that was a very interesting thing. It was an auxiliary of the Air Force, and we wore, when we had to go out and work, we wore uniforms. And what we did was had to take a lot of things like all kinds of courses in that. And a lot of times we would fly on the planes from Portland up around Bonneville Dam. And what we were doing was looking for submarines that they thought would maybe come up the river
Oh,
to
I see.
destroy the dam. It was a very interesting thing, but that happened during the war.
I see.
And we had to go to drill down at the armory in Portland. That was an interesting thing too. So that was just one of the things that I remember during the war. My mother was on a lookout tower, which was up on the top of Minthorn Hill near our
In
church.
Milwaukie.
In Milwaukee.
In Milwaukee, and they had to look for
I did that
airplanes,
too. You had to listen, and if any airplane went by, you had to identify it or
report it.
report it. And
So what was this tower like? I mean, describe it to me, because I'm having a
It's-
hard time here.
it's like a, you know, when you go out in the forest and they have those fire watchers.
Fire lookout?
Fire lookout, that's what
Uh-huh.
it was like.
Okay, so it had a staircase that went up into it, pretty high up,
Way up,
above treetops?
at least
It was
treetop.
very high.
Yeah, I don't know, it was pretty high up, yeah.
And they gave you binoculars?
No, you just listened.
Oh.
And when you heard an airplane, well, I don't know what they did in the daytime.
Probably.
At nighttime is when we went, I went with my mom. You just listened, and if you heard an airplane, you had to report it, which direction it was going, and et cetera.
How could you identify it in the dark?
I don't think you could identify what kind it was. It was just that it was an airplane.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Huh, amazing. Did you ever spot any German
No.
aircraft flying over
No.
Milwaukee?
No. Disappointing.
No hordes of soldiers marching
No.
up? Darn.
Oh, we entertained the soldiers sometimes at the beach. You can.
Yeah.
We had friends that had a house at the beach, and it was at
Lincoln City.
Lincoln City, and the whole hillside that's now built up with houses down there was the army camp, and so all the jeeps and things were camouflaged with
Bushes.
trees and bushes. And you'd see these bushes going down the road. Anyway, during the daytime, we'd go out and pick huckleberries down there, and this lady would make huckleberry pies, and we'd invite some of the soldiers in, and we'd play games and feed them huckleberry pie.
Oh, they were a
That
long
was
way from
very
home.
interesting.
Yeah, it was. Sounds like fun. Well, we've covered a lot of territory. Dylan, do you have any specific questions?
Let's see. A lot of it was already answered. Oh, did you have any friends or family in the service during the war?
Our brother was in the service, but not the World War II. He was in
Korean
Korean
War,
War.
yes.
Yeah. And he was stationed over in Germany.
His main job was to take the officers around in a jeep, so he had an interesting job of meeting
Pretty
all these
safe.
high-up officials.
Did did your father serve in any military capacity?
Yeah, well, he was in the army, but he got the measles or chicken pox or something, and he
He was
couldn't
a-
go overseas, so he got stuck here.
Oh,
He
okay.
didn't get to go, but he was in the army,
He was in.
and he was
just
discharged.
World War
over-
I, yeah.
Mhm,
never
World War
got
I, yeah.
never got sent overseas.
Right. Yeah. That's it.
I guess all of it really got covered.
Yeah.
I just have a few general things at this point. Are there any streets up in Milwaukee or this area that were named for any of your family members?
We have one aunt that lived as you're coming, they changed all these streets. If you're coming down River Road and before you get just going down the brow of the hill to the highway, we had an aunt that was there that they called it Burke Street, though instead of Birkemeier was too long, so they called it Burke Street.
Okay.
That's the only one.
Okay,
that
but
I know.
she had been a Birkemeier?
Yes.
Or was a Birkemeier?
She was a Birkemeier.
Okay. And then Briggs, of course, that's
Briggs.
pretty obvious.
Yeah,
Any
yeah.
others in the neighborhood?
I don't think so.
Don't think
I
so?
don't think so.
Would you go back? If you had it to do all over again, would you go back to any part of that era of your lifetime again?
I think I would. I loved high school times. We could walk Aldercrest from one end to the other. We didn't have to worry about cars and a lot of houses, and we did a lot of outdoor things, and we did a lot of fun things, and we did it all together. Now it seems like there's not that togetherness, and I like that.
Enid?
Yeah, I think the same. Well, all my life I had fun. I think back
Kind of
in those
frog, she
days,
had fun.
going to the football games and the things
Yeah.
that were close by, and
Because everybody went to those things in Milwaukee. The town supported them really good because there wasn't any other high schools around to support. They all came out.
So do you see that life has changed a lot from the era that you were growing up till the way you think young people are growing up today?
Too fast-paced.
Fast-paced.
They don't think so.
No.
And down the road, that's going to be the same when they're asked. It's going to say the same thing.
They'll say the same thing, huh? Well, do you two ladies have any last words of historic wisdom for us? Anything else?
Yes. Ask your parents questions now and write it down of things that you wished you, but now see, there's so many things we wish we had asked or we knew and we didn't. So I think people should be more interested in, even if you don't care a lot right now, write it down and keep it somewhere.
Do you have any advice for families that have family photos?
Put a date on them.
Write on them.
Write on them. Put a date on them. I can't even go back to some of mine 10 years ago and remember.
How do you write on a digital photo?
What I do, I have my pictures taken off, and my daughter likes to do scrapbooking, and so I give them to her, and she makes pictures and puts them in a scrapbook and
she
marks them
does
for me.
have to.
Very smart advice.
Yeah, she mentioned to keep a record of it. Well, this is just the Birkemeier family, and I have 2 books on the Briggs family, and it's kind of neat to look back on those things.
Yeah, yeah.
Very helpful to have, isn't it? Well, I have no more questions. I sure thank you very much for coming over today and sitting with us and telling your life stories. We very much appreciate it.
Well, it was nice to be here and to meet you and to meet you and you.
Okay then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The end.